Yashwant Sinha, the Budget General.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to present the budget for the year 2002-2003. Sir, the year 2001, the first year of the millennium, was a year of many tragic events. It started with the earthquake in Gujarat on January 26 and ended with a terrorist attack on our parliament on December 13, punctuated by September 11 incident in the United States and the October 1 outrage in Srinagar. I salute the brave members of our security forces who defended this parliament and made the supreme sacrifice. Sir, on the economic front too, it has been a difficult year. World economic growth is estimated to have slowed down to 2.4% in 2001 after 7 consecutive years of higher growth. International terror and global economic slowdown have been the sad features of the past year. Sir, despite the hostile economic and security environment, the economy has performed relatively well this year. After irregular monsoons in the previous 2 years, an agricultural recovery was enabled by a relatively well-distributed monsoon this year. Economic growth this year is expected to be about 5.4%, higher growth being constrained by the industrial slowdown. The basic fundamentals of the economy remain strong. Inflation has fallen to a record low of 1.1%. Foreign exchange reserves have crossed $50 billion, and our food stocks have risen to almost 60 million tons. The fall in petroleum prices has provided further relief to the economy as a whole. While the country is economically secure, there are still many challenges facing us. These have been described in detail in the economic survey presented to this House on February 26. My effort, sir, is to devise a budget strategy to meet these challenges. In my last budget, I had laid out a comprehensive agenda of the second generation of economic reforms. I had also deepened tax reforms aimed at providing a modern tax regime. My aim this year is to consolidate and implement these policies at all levels. I propose to take this process further at the state level through a strategy of reform-linked public funding. The broad strategy of the budget therefore, sir, is to continue the emphasis on agriculture and food economy reforms, enhance public and private investment in infrastructure, strengthen the financial sector and capital markets, deepen structural reforms and regenerate industrial growth, provide social security to the poor, consolidate tax reforms, and continue fiscal adjustment at both the central and state levels. The implementation, sir, of the announcements made in the last budget has been very closely monitored throughout the year. I started the practice last year to submit to Parliament an action-taken report on the previous year's budget. Accordingly, I am presenting a detailed action-taken report on last year's budget announcements. Some of the highlights are deregulation of controls on agricultural commodities, progress towards decontrol of sugar, substantial reduction in the span of price control on drugs, decision to amend the existing legislation governing revival and winding up of companies, along with the abolition of SICA, substantial progress in privatization, progress in the implementation of Expenditure Reforms Commission's recommendations, and announcement of VRS for surplus government employees. These decisions demonstrate the resolve of this government to carry forward the process of economic reforms and to ensure that the benefits reach the common man. This will require improved implementation and governance. We shall put in place measures to effect improvement in these areas with the objective of eliminating poverty and improving the quality of life of our citizens. Sir, agriculture, having achieved great success with the Green Revolution and then the White Revolution, the country is now ready for its third revolution in agriculture, which is diversification and food processing. This requires policy changes, a renewed thrust on agricultural research and extension, a new climate that encourages much greater investment in both public and private sectors, removal of the remaining regulatory and procedural rigidities that still exist, and improved rural infrastructure is essential for this new revolution. Freedom to the farmer, Kisan ki Azadi, is the overarching goal of our policy. Even though agriculture is a state subject, there are a number of central government policies that influence this sector. The government has reviewed the operation of the Essential Commodities Act 1955. Restricted orders inhibiting storage, selling, and movement of food and agricultural products are being removed. We can now look forward to a countrywide integrated market for agricultural products. To continue this initiative, I am proposing further decontrol and deregulation of agriculture along the following lines. 1. Amendment of the Milk and Milk Products Control Order to remove restrictions on new milk processing capacity while continuing to regulate health and safety conditions. Removal of small-scale industry reservation related to various agricultural equipment items. Decanalization of export of agricultural commodities and phasing out of remaining export controls. Expansion of futures and forward trading to cover all agricultural commodities. Sir, a multiplicity of regulations for food standards under the Prevention of Food Adulteration Act, the Food Products Order, the Meat Products Order, the Bureau of Industrial Standards, and the Milk and Milk Products Order affect the food and processing sectors. They need to be modernized and converged. Sir, the Honorable Prime Minister has decided to set up a group of ministers to propose legislative and other changes in preparing a modern integrated food law and related regulations. Sir, this process of providing freedom to the farmer now needs to be carried forward by the state governments. Amendment to the Agricultural Produce Marketing Acts to enable the farmer to sell directly to potential processors would help them receive better prices and access potential new markets. In addition, the remaining state control orders, which are acting as barriers to interstate trade, need to be lifted. I am proposing that additional allocations in respect of centrally sponsored schemes would be linked to decontrol and deregulation of the agricultural sector by the states. In 2000-2001, I had announced a credit-linked subsidy scheme for construction of cold storages. I am happy to report that sanctions have already been issued for the creation of 21 lakh ton capacity in cold storages, much higher than the target of 12 lakh tons. The Rural Go-Down scheme announced last year has also become operational. With the removal of various control orders, much greater investment would be forthcoming under both these schemes. Accordingly, I propose to allocate 70 crore to each of these subsidy-linked schemes in the year 2002-2003. Sir, as Finance Minister, I feel particularly responsible for the flow of adequate credit to the agricultural sector. I am glad to report that the total credit flow to agricultural sector through institutional channels is expected to reach the targeted level of rupees 64,000 crore this year. It is expected to increase to rupees 75,000 crore in 2000-2003. I propose the following steps to further improve the delivery of agricultural credit. The funds of Rural Infrastructure Development Fund 8 will be enhanced to rupees 5,500 crore from rupees 5,000 crore next year, while the rate of interest will be reduced from 10.5% to 8.5%. Henceforth, it will be fixed at the prevailing bank rate plus 2%. Assistance to the states from the RIDF will be linked to reforms in the agriculture and rural sectors. Kisan credit cards, sir, introduced in 98-99, have been a resounding success and have helped our farmers considerably in their access to agricultural credit. An additional 63 lakh Kisan credit cards have been issued up to December 31, 2001, taking the total to 2 crore and 7 lakh farmers. The personal insurance package linked to Kisan credit cards has also been operationalized. Similarly, the scheme of microcredit through self-help groups is progressing well. The target of 1 lakh additional self-help groups during the current year is expected to be achieved, taking the total so far to more than 3.5 lakh, covering more than 70 lakh families, making it the largest microcredit program in the world. I am raising the target to 1.25 lakh for 2002-2003. A one-time settlement scheme for small loan amounts with outstanding principal balance up to rupees 25,000 as on March 31, 1998 is already in operation. A special one-time settlement scheme for small and marginal farmers will be announced by the RBI to cover loans up to rupees 50,000. Sir, the National Agricultural Insurance Scheme is already in operation. To subserve the needs of farmers better and to move towards a sustainable actuarial regime, I propose to set up a new corporation for agricultural insurance to be promoted by the existing public sector insurance companies. Sir, I propose to increase the allocation to the Accelerated Irrigation Benefit Program from rupees 2,000 crore this year to rupees 2,800 crore in 2002-2003. This will assist the states to accelerate the completion of unfinished medium and major irrigation projects and also to undertake reforms by revising user charges and setting up Water Users Association. The accelerated diversification and modernization of agriculture will need a new approach to research and extension services. I therefore propose to enhance the allocation for 2002-2003 for agricultural research from rupees 7,775 crore from rupees 684 crore in the current year. A full review of the governance of agricultural research is also proposed so that the system can serve the new needs creatively. Linkages between research and extension will be strengthened to improve quality and effectiveness of research and extension systems. The extension system will be revitalized and broad-based through Krishi Vigyan Kendras, NGOs, farmers' organizations, cooperatives, the corporate sector, and agribusiness clinics. Krishi Vigyan Kendras will be designated as nodal agencies for quality certification, including organic products, biofertilizers, and biopesticides. The supply of inputs, agro-processing, and trade through such cooperatives and companies will be encouraged through the availability of credit with the help of NABARD. The company's Second Amendment Bill 2001, already introduced in Parliament, will enable the conversion of existing producer cooperative businesses into companies. Promotion of agricultural exports is important for creating conditions for providing remunerative prices to farm produce. For this purpose, agri-export zones are being promoted in different states, and 15 such zones have been approved so far. APIDA will catalyze development of infrastructure and flow of credit to the units in these agri-export zones. Sir, the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, initiated to provide connectivity through all-weather roads to all our villages, is making considerable headway. A further allocation of 2,500 crore for the year 2002-2003 is being made over and above rupees 5,000 crore provided so far. Depending on the accelerated implementation of these works, I intend to find additional resources, including those from multilateral sources, in the course of the year. During my last budget speech, sir, I had announced a package of initiatives for electrification of 80,000 villages that have no access to electricity. Considering the fact that state electricity boards find it difficult to service the debt, the government proposes to introduce a new interest subsidy scheme called the Accelerated Rural Electrification Program. An outlay of rupees 164 crore has been provided for this scheme next year. Sir, the Sampurna Gramin Rozgar Yojana, announced by the Prime Minister, in his Independence Day speech of 2001, was launched on September 25, 2001, by merging the ongoing Employment Assurance Scheme and the Jawahar Gram Samriddhi Yojana. Since the launch of the scheme, the release of 30.6 lakh tons of food grains to the states has already been authorized, out of the total of 50 lakh tons. This scheme will be continued next year. I urge upon all the states to come forward to take full advantage of the free food grains being offered under this scheme. Sir, Lok Nayak Jayaprakash Narayan always had a special concern for the disadvantaged. In his birth centenary year, I propose to launch the Jayaprakash Rozgar Guarantee Yojana to provide employment guarantee to the unemployed in the most distressed districts of the country. A task force headed by my colleague, the Minister of Rural Development, will be set up to design and implement a massive program for employment generation in these districts. The Khadi and Village Industries Commission, the Development Commission of Small-Scale Industries, and other agencies will be fully involved in the implementation of this scheme. The promotion of rural industrialization would be helped greatly through capacity building and technology upgradation in Khadi and village industries. To help in this effort, I propose to upgrade the Wardha Institute, started by Mahatma Gandhi in 1935, as a national institute to be called Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Rural Industrialization. The diversification of agriculture will not succeed without appropriate infrastructure for marketing. For this purpose, rural local bodies, cooperatives, and NGOs will be assisted to set up rural produce marketing centers and sub-centers at the district and block levels, and to upgrade village hearts under the special scheme of the Swan Jayanti Gram Swarojgar Yojana. Some parts of our country have been particularly afflicted with natural calamities. Additional allocation of rupees 480 crore was provided under the Indira Awas Yojana for the affected states. Houses constructed by the poor under the Indira Awas Yojana in such disaster-prone areas will henceforth be provided insurance cover through a master policy. I had drawn attention last year, sir, to the severe policy and fiscal difficulties arising from the growing mismatch between the unprecedented level of procurement of wheat and rice by the Food Corporation of India and the much lower PDS and buffer stock needs of the last few years. The current situation of open-ended procurement by FCI at a high price and disposal at a heavily subsidized price is not sustainable. The concept of decentralized procurement has not yet found favor with the states. The report of the High-Level Committee on Long-Term Grain Policy is expected to be submitted shortly. We shall formulate a more durable approach for better management of our food economy after considering this report. A number of steps have been taken by the government to reduce the high food and food grain stocks that are posing serious problem of storage and disposal. These measures include increased allocation for BPL families, launching of a major food for work program under the Sampurna Gramin Rozgar Yojana, allocation of 30 lakh tons of free food grains to the states for relief work in areas affected by natural calamities, open market sales of 30 lakh tons this year compared to 5.5 lakh tons last year, and enhanced incentive for export of food grains. Sir, I am now coming to infrastructure. Provision of efficient and world-class infrastructure is critical for our growth aspirations. A key issue that bears repetition is the imposition of appropriate user charges necessary to provide adequate returns on investment. Some success has been achieved in areas such as telecom, roads, and ports, where appropriate user charges exist. With the tariff rationalization and other bold measures introduced by my colleague, the Minister of Railways, we can expect the railways to serve well the key transportation needs of the country in the years to come. Other areas such as power, urban infrastructure, other transportation, and the like continue to experience great difficulties because of the lack of appropriate user charges. Restoration of financial viability in the power sector remains crucial. The average rate of return of all state electricity boards is about -40%, and their combined losses continue to increase. Hence, this is one of the foremost challenges not only in the power sector, but also for the fiscal health of the state governments and the overall performance of the economy. In recognition of these severe problems, the Prime Minister held a meeting with the state chief ministers on 3rd March 2001. While broadly agreeing with the desirability of power sector reforms to achieve commercial viability of state electricity boards, the conference placed special emphasis on distribution reforms and elimination of theft of electricity. Subsequently, the high-level empowered group of chief ministers and union ministers has agreed to a one-time settlement scheme in regard to the SEB overdues to the central public sector utilities through securitization and issue of tax-free bonds by the respective state governments, subject to the achievement of a specified performance milestones and full payment of current dues in future. I would urge upon the states to come forward and implement the scheme speedily. The Ministry of Power has already signed memoranda of understanding with 20 states and is expected to complete the exercise in the remaining states very soon. To redouble our effort in this direction, Accelerated Power Development Program is being redesigned as the Accelerated Power Development and Reform Program, with an enhanced plan allocation of rupees 3,500 crore, up from rupees 1,500 crore this year. Access to the states to the fund will be on the basis of agreed reform programs, the centerpiece of which would be the narrowing and ultimate elimination of the gap between the unit cost of supply and revenue realization within a specified time frame. Accordingly, the focus of reform in the power sector has shifted from generation to transmission and distribution. A high-level monitoring group will oversee the progress of this program. Allocation for this program will be augmented by loans and concessions on terms from the Power Finance Corporation. Sir, I am glad to inform the House that the Prime Minister's National Highway Development Program, launched 3 years ago, is progressing well. It now promises to achieve a totally new scenario in the road sector. The Golden Quadrilateral will be completed substantially by December 2003, 1 year ahead of schedule. The north-south, east-west corridors have a length of 7,300 kilometers, of which 716 kilometers have already been four-laned. With the assistance of multilateral funding, other borrowings by the National Highway Authority of India, with government guarantee and other innovative financing schemes, the funding for this project will be tied up in 2002-2003. So the present port trust structure does not allow the Indian major ports to have the flexibility needed for efficient management and for raising institutional funding. It is therefore proposed to corporatize major ports in a phased manner. Private sector investment have been facilitated, and 17 projects worth more than rupees 4,500 crore have already been approved, and another 8 projects worth more than 3,200 crore are under consideration. With corporatization of the existing ports and new private sector ports coming up, the regulatory structure will be strengthened. So the government has already announced its decision to upgrade the international airports at Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata to the standards of world-class airports by inducting private sector management and investment through long-term leasing systems. Modalities for inviting offers have been finalized, and the leasing process will be completed in 2002-2003. Private sector participation in greenfield airports will be encouraged through a package of concessions, and these are availability of land and related infrastructure from the state governments, exemption from levy of inland air travel tax and foreign travel tax on departing passengers for projects located in states that charge sales tax on aviation turbine fuel at central sales tax rates, charging of advanced development fee by way of additional passenger service fee at the existing airports for help in financing of the greenfield airport, levy of user development fee at the new airport, financial assistance, equity participation by Airports Authority of India. The proposed new airports at Hyderabad and Bangalore will benefit from these concessions. So the 2001 census shows that the urban population in India is now about 285 million, greater than the total population of the United States of America. The number of cities with more than 1 million population has increased from 23 in 1991 to 35 in 2001. We are aware of the sad plight of most of our towns and cities. This needs to be changed if they have to act as engines of growth and if they have to provide a healthy environment for our citizens. Hence, we can no longer afford to delay reforms in this sector. I propose to set up an urban reform incentive fund with an initial allocation of Rs 500 crore to provide reform-linked assistance to the states. The fund will seek to incentivize reforms in the following sectors: reform of rent control laws and repeal of urban land ceiling acts, rationalization of high stamp duty regimes, revision of bylaws to streamline the approval process for construction of buildings, development of sites, etc., revision of municipal laws in line with the model legislation prepared by the Ministry of Urban Development and Poverty Alleviation, simplification of legal and procedural frameworks for conversion of agricultural land for non-agricultural purposes, levy of realistic user charges and resource mobilization by urban local bodies, initiation of public-private partnership in the provision of civic services. A city challenge fund will be set up as an incentive-based facility that will support cities to fund transitional costs of moving towards sustainable and credit-worthy institutional systems of municipal management and service delivery. It will assist the partial funding of the cost of developing an economic reform program and financially viable projects to be undertaken by urban local bodies. It is also proposed to set up a pooled finance development scheme to provide credit enhancement to assist local bodies to access market borrowing on a credit-worthy basis. To provide a further incentive for urban local bodies to become credit-worthy and to invest in urban infrastructure, I am providing for the issue of municipal tax-free bonds up to Rs 500 crore in 2002-2003, up from 200 crore in the current year. Tourism, sir, constitutes a priority area in view of its beneficial impact on growth of employment, generation of foreign exchange, and the promotion of greater national integration through domestic tourism. It is therefore proposed to implement a comprehensive tourism development package. 6 tourism circuits will be identified for development to international standards during 2002-2003. A special purpose vehicles will be permitted to raise resources from both public and private sectors for infrastructure development in these circuits. One special area, the World Heritage Site of Hampi, will be developed as an international destination for tourism based on an integrated master plan. The plan outlay for tourism has accordingly been increased by 50% to Rs 225 crore for 2002-2003. I'll have more to say on the fiscal measures relating to tourism in Part B of my speech. Some members are aware of the continuing effort that we have made to attract private sector investment in infrastructure sector to supplement public investment. The flow of investment has, however, been slow except in the telecom sector. I therefore propose to take the following measures to facilitate faster private investment in infrastructure sector. An infrastructure equity fund of Rs 1,000 crore will be set up to help in providing equity investment for infrastructure projects. Contributions to the fund, to be managed by the Infrastructure Development Finance Company Limited, would initially be made by public sector insurance companies, financial institutions, and some banks. An institutional mechanism is being set up to coordinate the debt financing by financial institutions and banks of infrastructure projects or larger than Rs 250 crore. IDFC will act as the coordinating institution with primary responsibility for different sectors being shared with the IDBI and ICICI. Public-private partnership will be encouraged for the provision of infrastructure facilities, the modalities for which are being worked out by a task force. Public investment in key infrastructure sectors is also being sharply stepped up. Plan outlay inclusive of internal and extra-budgetary resources in power, roads, national highways and railways is being increased by 22%, 39%, and 23% respectively, to a total of 37,919 crore. Substantial progress has been made on the proposals made last year for the development of a transparent and active debt market in general, and the government securities market in particular. Primary issuance of government securities is now being facilitated by an electronic negotiated dealing system, and efficiency of trading in government securities is being enhanced by the new Clearing Corporation of India. To help investors plan their investment better and to add transparency and stability in the market, RBI will announce an issuance calendar for dated government securities. Having now received the concurrence of all the state legislatures, I also propose to introduce a new government securities bill to replace the old Public Debt Act 1949 within this Parliament session. Sir, in view of the various disturbances that have occurred in the capital markets, it is important to boost investor confidence and to strengthen market integrity. The following measures are being taken. The process of demutualization and corporatization of stock exchanges is expected to be completed during the course of the year to implement the decision to separate ownership, management, and operation of stock exchanges. The Securities and Exchange Board of India has already prohibited the induction of broker members in management positions in stock exchanges. Legislative changes will be proposed during the budget session in SEBI Act 1992 for investor protection and to enhance the effectiveness of SEBI as the capital market regulator. Following certain developments overseas and within the country regarding accounting standards and effectiveness of auditors, it is proposed to strengthen regulation in this area. Foreign institutional investors can invest in a company under the portfolio investment route beyond 24% of the paid-up capital of the company with the approval of the general body of the shareholders by a special resolution. I propose that now FII portfolio investment will not be subject to the sectoral limits for foreign direct investment except in specified sectors. Guidelines in this regard will be issued separately. Further measures have been taken to develop and deepen the capital market. Badla trading has been banned, and practically all trading of stocks is now in the rolling settlement mode. Exchange-traded derivatives have become wider with greater choice of instruments and deeper in terms of liquidity. Individual stock options and index stock options were introduced in July 2001 and individual stock futures in November 2001. Foreign institutional investors are now permitted to trade in all stock-traded derivative products within specified trading limits. An investor education and protection fund has been set up from October 1, 2001 to credit certain unclaimed and unpaid amounts. A package of measures for reforming the US 64 scheme and the Unit Trust of India has been announced, which seeks to balance investors' interests with ensuring systemic safety. The long overdue reform of making US 64 NAV-based has been implemented. Further legislative changes in the UTI Act to put in place other needed reform measures will be proposed during the year. Sir, reforms in the banking sector will be continued to enhance the efficiency and competitiveness of the sector. The following measures have either been taken or are being taken. Public sector banks recovered 12,860 crore in 2000-2001 as compared to rupees 9,883 crore in the previous year, and net NPAs as a percentage of net advances has come down to 6.7% as on March 31, 2001, compared to 7.4% in the previous year. 29 debt recovery tribunals and 5 appellate tribunals have been set up. As on September 30, 2001, the DRTs had disposed of 18,703 cases involving 14,026 crore. Recovery was made of rupees 3,527 crore. To help banks and financial institutions to make provision for NPAs as required by the RBI, additional fiscal relief is being offered, details of which will be given in Part B of my speech. This will enable banks to review their lending rates. A new bill on banking sector reforms is proposed to be introduced in Parliament to strengthen creditor rights through foreclosure and enforcement of securities by banks and financial institutions. This will also enable securitization for money locked up in the long-term loans. A pilot asset reconstruction company will be set up by June 30th, 2002, with the participation of public and private sector banks, financial institutions, and multilateral agencies. This company will initiate measures for taking over non-performing assets in the banking sector and also develop a market for securitized loans. The Deposit Insurance Credit and Guarantee Corporation will be converted into the Bank Deposits Insurance Corporation to make it an effective instrument for dealing with depositors' risk and for dealing with distressed banks. Appropriate legislative changes will be proposed for this purpose. Reforms in the financial sector have posed new challenges for the development finance institutions like IDBI. It is proposed to make legislative changes to corporatize IDBI within the coming year to provide it appropriate flexibility. Meanwhile, IDBI's Tier 1 capital is being strengthened by conversion of existing IBRD and NIC loans into appropriate long-term instruments. Consequent to certain amendments made in the year 2000 in the Companies Act 1956, directors incur disqualification for election in case of certain defaults by the company. It is proposed to exempt nominee directors of public financial institutions and banks from this provision. Sir, 3 public sector banks had been classified as weak banks on the basis of the criteria suggested by the Committee on Banking Sector Reforms in 97-98. 2 of these banks, namely UCO Bank and United Bank of India, have turned around and have started making profits. Though the Indian Bank has also shown considerable improvement, its capital adequacy ratio remains deficient. A provision of Rs 1,300 crore is proposed for recapitalization of this bank on the basis of commitment to Government of India for implementing monitorable reform measures. In the banking sector, foreign banks are permitted to operate in India as fully owned branches with a specific permission of the Reserve Bank of India. As recommended by the Committee on Banking Sector Reforms, it has now been decided to give an option to the foreign banks to either operate as branches of their parent banks or to set up subsidiaries. A foreign bank will have to choose only one of the 2 options. Such subsidiaries will have to adhere to all banking regulations, including priority sector lending norms applicable to other domestic banks. Necessary amendments will be proposed in the Banking Regulation Act 1949 to relax the maximum ceiling of voting rights of 10% for such subsidiaries. The cooperative credit structure, which is critical for the agricultural sector, has low capital adequacy and high NPAs, is in urgent need of reform. I had appointed a committee under the then Deputy Governor of RBI to examine its functioning closely. The recommendations of the committee have been discussed widely by Chief Ministers and a joint committee of cooperation ministers under the chairmanship of my colleague Shri V.K. Patil. Reform measures such as the adoption of a Model Cooperative Act, removal of dual control between state governments and the RBI, regular conduct of elections, larger stake of the members, professionalization of management have been recommended. The recapitalization formula suggested is 60-40 between the central and state governments, along with increase in share capital of members. States will have to consider and accept their funding share and implement the suggested measures for reform. Even though this is a state subject, the Government of India will go out of its way to help in the process. To start the process, I am making a token provision of Rs 100 crore, and depending on the pace of reform, provision of additional funds will be considered. So the initiatives taken in the housing finance area in the last 4 years have shown positive results. Total disbursement from housing finance institutions in 2000-2001 was Rs 26,300 crore, a growth of about 28% in the year. This amount financed the construction of about 28 lakh houses, much higher than the annual target of 20 lakh houses. In the current year, the growth rate is expected to be around 35%. To further strengthen the housing finance, the following measures are being taken. Consequent to the amendment of the National Housing Bank Act, NHB has commenced securitization of housing loan and is operationalizing foreclosure of mortgages. The NHB will launch a mortgage credit guarantee scheme which would be provided to all housing loans thereby fully protecting lenders against default. This will make housing credit more affordable, thereby also increasing access to housing credit in rural areas. The target under the Golden Jubilee Rural Housing Finance Scheme is proposed to be increased to Rs 2.25 lakh for 2002-2003, up from 1.7 lakh in the current year. About 1 lakh units have already been financed up to December 2001. The allocation of Indira Awas Yojana is being increased by 13% to Rs 1,725 crore in 2000-2003. I'll have more to say on housing in Part B of my speech. Sir, capital account convertibility has been on our agenda for quite some time. In view of the many disturbances that have taken place in the international capital markets in recent years, I propose to continue with our policy of liberalization with caution. Accordingly, I propose to take the following steps to liberalize the capital account further. There will be full convertibility of deposit schemes for non-resident Indians. The existing foreign currency non-resident scheme and the non-resident external rupee scheme will continue to be repatriable. The scheme which do not offer full convertibility to NRIs will be discontinued from 1st April 2002. The existing balances in the non-resident rupee accounts will be allowed to be credited on maturity to the convertible NRE account. NRIs will be free to repatriate in foreign exchange their current earnings in India, such as rent, dividend, pension, interest, and the like, based on appropriate certification. Indian companies wishing to invest abroad may now invest up to $100 million on an annual basis through the automatic route, up from the existing limit of $50 million. Indian companies making overseas investment in joint ventures abroad by market purchases may now do so without prior approval up to 50% of their net worth, up from the current limit of 25%. Corporates with proven track record will be allowed to contribute funds from their foreign exchange earnings for setting up charities, chairs in educational institutions abroad, and for other welfare measures likely to benefit the community abroad on a case-by-case basis by the RBI. Indian mutual funds will now be allowed to invest in rated securities in countries with fully convertible currencies within the existing limits. Earlier, such investment was only permitted in ADR, GDR issued by Indian companies in overseas markets. Prepayment of ECBs is now permissible to the extent of balances available in EEFC account, which are currently restricted to 50% of export proceeds. To enable ECB holders to benefit from lower interest rates, utilization of higher amounts from the export proceeds will be considered by the RBI. With a view to further liberalize the capital account transactions, it is proposed to put the foreign currency convertible bond scheme under the automatic route up to $50 million. The Reserve Bank of India will be issuing guidelines for each of these measures separately. While liberalization of the capital account is necessary, we have to exercise careful vigilance in curbing illegal capital flows. Recent evidence indicates transfer of large sums of money through various channels in support of terrorist activities in the country. The government therefore proposes to bring suitable legislation during the current session of Parliament to empower the enforcement agencies to arrest and prosecute the Hawala operators, money launderers suspected to be engaged in financial transactions linked with terrorist activities. Sir, as decided by the government in November 1997 and reiterated by me last year, I am glad to announce the dismantling of the administered price mechanism in the petroleum sector from April 1, 2002. As a result, the following measures are being taken. The pricing of petroleum products will become market determined. The oil pool account will be dismantled on April 1, 2002, and the outstanding balances will be liquidated by issue of oil bonds to the concerned oil companies. Private companies will be permitted in distribution subject to specified guidelines. A petroleum regulatory board will be set up to oversee the sector. Subsidies to the refineries in the Northeast will continue on a rationalized basis. Freight subsidies will continue to be provided for LPG and kerosene to far-flung areas. As a result of dismantling of the APM, the price of diesel will come down by around 50 paise per litre and of petrol by around 1 rupee per litre. These changes in prices will come into effect from March 1, 2002, initially as part of the oil pool account. Sir, in 1997, the government decision on the dismantling of APM mandated the subsidy on LPG and kerosene oil to be reduced to 15% and 33% respectively by April 1, 2002. Accordingly, the price of LPG is being raised by about Rs 40 per cylinder and of kerosene oil for PDS by about Rs 1 rupee 50 paise per litre from March 1, 2002. These subsidies will be borne by the consolidated fund from April 1, 2002. The subsidies on LPG and kerosene will be on a specified flat rate basis from April 1, 2002. The retail prices will then vary as the price of crude oil changes in international market. These subsidies will be phased out in the next 3 to 5 years. The post-APM excise and custom duty changes will be spelled out in Part B of my speech. Since the subsidy burden will be borne by the union budget from next year, the taxation measures have been designed to raise the required sources. The further details of dismantling of APM will be announced separately by my colleague, the Minister for Petroleum and Natural Gas. To deal with the forces of competition, industrial and other companies require restructuring on a continuous basis. For this purpose, it is essential to promote out-of-court mechanisms for timely and transparent corporate debt restructuring of viable entities in addition to the use of legal avenues of financial restructuring. A corporate debt restructuring has already been set up. I have decided that a small group of experts under the chairmanship of the Deputy Governor, Reserve Bank of India, will be set up to suggest measures to make its operation more efficient. In Part B of my speech, I will provide for specific fiscal measures for strengthening certain key industries, including steel and textile, and other measures for improving the competitiveness of the manufacturing sector. As honourable members are aware, small-scale industries are now subject to increasing competition with the completion of trade liberalisation. A new approach to the promotion of small-scale industries, therefore, has already been adopted. Adequate credit flow is essential for the small-scale sector. The net bank credit outstanding to small-scale industries increased from Rs 45,789 crore as on March 31, 2000 to Rs 48,445 crore as on March 31, 2001. In order to further increase the flow of credit, the limit for composite loans has been increased from Rs 2 lakh to Rs 5 lakh. 391 specialized branches of public sector banks have been opened for small-scale industries as of September 30, 2001. The exemption limit for collateral security has been increased from 25,000 to Rs 5 lakhs. The project cost limit under the National Equity Fund has been increased from 25 lakhs to 50 lakhs. Extension of credit SSI has already been facilitated through the Credit Guarantee Scheme and the Credit-Linked Capital Subsidy Scheme for Technology Upgradation. Encouraged by the Kisan Credit Card Scheme, public sector banks have now decided to introduce a scheme called the Laghu Udyami Credit Card Scheme for providing simplified and borrower-friendly credit facilities to small businessmen, retail traders, artisans, and small entrepreneurs, professionals, and other self-employed people, including those in the tiny sector. Members will recall that last year I had announced the de-reservation of 14 items in the footwear, leather goods, and toy sectors. The government has been engaged in discussions with the stakeholders in respect of certain other items in the reserved list. Over 50 items of knitwear, certain agricultural implements, auto components, some chemicals and drugs, and others will now be de-reserved. My colleague, the Minister for Small-Scale Industries, will announce the details of these schemes separately. The government is committed to provide all assistance to accelerate export growth. A key new initiative is the establishment of special economic zones. I will announce a comprehensive package for SEZs in Part B of my speech. To provide incentives to state governments for export promotion through the creation of new export promotion industrial parks and associated facilities, I propose to increase the outlay on the scheme from rupees 97 crore this year to rupees 330 crore for 2002-2003. Overall outlay for the Department of Commerce for the year 2002-2003 has been increased by 55% to rupees 775 crore. Sir, the 93rd Amendment of the Constitution has made free and compulsory education for all children in the 6 to 14 age group a fundamental right. Necessary infrastructure for making this possible will be created. Accordingly, the plan allocation to the Department of Elementary Education and Literacy is being enhanced from rupees 4,000 crore this year to rupees 4,900 crore for 2002-2003. Last year, I had announced a new comprehensive education loan scheme to cover all courses in schools and colleges in India and abroad. The scheme has served the student community well, and loans amounting to about rupees 670 crore have already been given to almost 50,000 students. Social Security, sir. Last year I had mentioned that the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority would be asked to provide a roadmap for a new pension scheme so that the unorganized sector is provided adequate social security coverage. IRDA has recommended a regulatory framework for setting up pension funds to enable individuals to subscribe on a defined contribution basis to obtain the benefits of pension on their retirement. Action on these recommendations will be taken by 30th June 2002. Access to good and responsive health care is still a distant dream for the majority of the rural population. An insurance scheme called Jana Raksha is being designed by the public sector insurance companies to provide protection to the needy population. With a payment of rupees 1 per day as insurance premium, a person will be entitled to indoor treatment up to rupees 30,000 per year at selected and designated hospitals. Outpatient treatment up to rupees 2,000 per year will be covered at designated clinics, which would also include civil hospitals, medical colleges, private trust hospitals, and other NGO-run institutions. So the year 2001 was celebrated as the Women's Empowerment Year, and several policy, legislative, and program initiatives have been launched to help in the empowerment of women. I am increasing the plan allocation for the Department of Women and Child Development by 33% to rupees 2,200 crore. In order to encourage the entry of large number of women to scientific professions, the government intends to institute at least 100 scholarships every year to be provided by the Department of Science and Technology to women scientists and technologists. Far too many children, sir, in our country continue to suffer from malnutrition. Accordingly, the Prime Minister announced a national nutrition mission in his Independence Day speech on August 15, 2000. Under this mission, food grain at subsidized rates would be made available to adolescent girls and expectant and nursing mothers belonging to below poverty line families through the ICDS structure. The National Institute of Siddha at Chennai is being provided rupees 4 crore for commencing its activities. A national Ayurvedic hospital will be set up at Delhi with private sector participation. I am further increasing the budgetary support for Indian systems of medicine next year by 25% to rupees 150 crore. The allocation for the welfare of and upliftment of scheduled castes in the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment has been increased to rupees 790 crore this year from rupees 879 crore in the coming year. The Ministry of Tribal Welfare has launched a number of schemes to improve the social and economic life of scheduled tribes in order to meet the requirements of various schemes such as scholarships, hostels, access to quality education, the establishment of grain banks, and other support schemes under the National Scheduled Tribes Finance and Development Corporation. I have increased the plan allocation outlay for tribal welfare by 21% to rupees 290 crore for 2002-2003. I am glad to inform the House that during the current year, an additional sum of rupees 500 crore was provided to the northeastern states and the central pool set up in 1998-99. This is rupees 187 crore more than last year. The provision for expenditure in the northeastern states out of central plan of various ministries has also been increased from rupees 3,457 crore in the current year to rupees 5,016 crore next year. So the plan allocation for the Department of Science and Technology is being raised to rupees 625 crore in 2002-2003, an increase of more than 52% over the current year. A fund for improvement of science and technology was established in 2000-2001 for augmenting laboratory facilities in the universities. Encouraged by the enthusiastic response to this fund, I propose to increase the allocation for this program to rupees 75 crore in 2002-2003, an increase of almost 115%. Resources from this fund can now also be used to augment library facilities in the universities. A National Innovation Foundation was set up in March 2000 with a corpus of rupees 20 crore in order to build a national register of outstanding traditional knowledge and grassroots innovations. This initiative has shown good results. In the second annual campaign, NIF has received more than 11,000 entries from all over the country, up from 948 entries in the first year. Encouraged by this enthusiastic response, I propose to set up a micro-venture capital fund for small innovations to be initiated by the Small Industries Development Bank in cooperation with the National Innovation Foundation to facilitate the transition of innovation into enterprise. Sir, India's global leadership in computer software must now be complemented by another area of our core competence, the vast terrain of the entertainment industry. Today, we are the world's largest producer of films. We have a rapidly expanding broadcasting sector, a huge reservoir of talent in music, and a promising potential to become the international hub for all types of inputs for the entertainment industry. Accordingly, the budgetary support to the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting is being increased by 22% to rupees 415 crore for the year 2000-2003. With the industry status to the entertainment sector brought into effect last year, banks and financial institutions have sanctioned more than rupees 236 crore so far for film and TV software production. Good money will certainly lead to good films. Film exports have been roughly doubling every year during the last 3 years. It's time we brought about a fiscal regime to usher in more khushi and take away the remaining gum from the entertainment industry. Filhal, I shall have more to say on this in Part B of my speech. In every budget speech, sir, I have, at the risk of irritating repetition, expressed my deep concern at the poor fiscal situation of the central and state governments. Reflecting this concern, I had introduced in Parliament the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Bill in December 2000. The recommendations of the Parliamentary Standing Committee of Finance are receiving our attention, and I propose to bring the bill for consideration in this August House within the current session. I had proposed to reduce the estimated fiscal deficit of 5.1% in RE 2000-2001 to 4.7% of GDP in BE 2001-2002. The industrial slowdown experienced in both 2000-2001 and the current year has reflected itself in the much lower than expected revenue collections from customs duty, excise duties, and corporate income tax. The non-plan expenditure, however, has been kept under strict check. As a consequence, Mr. Speaker, sir, you will be pleased to hear that non-plan expenditure for the current year is lower by more than 10,000 crore over the budgeted amount. However, mindful of the industrial slowdown and the need for continued public investment, plan expenditure has not only been protected, but is actually higher than the budget estimates. The GDP estimate for the year has also been lowered. As a result, fiscal deficit is now expected to be 5.7% of GDP in the current year. Putting our fiscal house in order must remain our highest priority. We have to make every effort to contain non-productive expenditure and make substantive improvements in our tax machinery so that revenue collection show higher buoyancy in coming years. I'll shortly outline my plans in this regard in Part B of my speech. The fastest increasing component of expenditure is that of subsidies. It is essential that they are reduced to the minimum over the next 3 to 5 years. However, access to the poor to adequate levels of nutrition through a well-targeted PDS will have to be ensured along with employment generation programs. Sir, the success achieved in containing non-plan expenditure has encouraged me to deepen the efforts in this direction. The recommendations of the Expenditure Reforms Commission provide a very useful framework for immediate moderation in expenditure growth. The ERC completed its work in September 2001 and submitted 10 reports covering 36 ministries, departments that had a total sanctioned staff of 8.65 lakh. Of the identified manpower surplus of 42,200 in these ministries, departments, nearly 12,200 posts are expected to be abolished by the end of March 2002. The remaining reports are at different stages of consideration. The decision to limit fresh recruitment to 1% of total civilian staff strength will continue to be implemented over the next 4 years. The availability of a VRS package that has now been approved will help in this effort to reduce the staff strength and ensure adequate security to the affected employees. We have made efforts to contain the fertilizer subsidy by plugging inefficiencies in the production system, which were earlier passed on to the government by producers and by periodical increases in issue prices. The ERC has recommended that the government should increase prices by 7% every year and move towards decontrol over the next 5 years. Fertilizer prices have not been increased for the last 2 years. I propose a modest increase in the issue price of urea, DAP, and MOP by about 5% to reduce the subsidy of SSP by rupees 50 per ton. The prices of complex fertilizers will also be suitably modified. The Ministry of Agriculture will notify them. In my further towards price distribution, 15 to 10%. Accordingly, the retail price of sugar will be 13.50 per kg from March 1, 2002. Because of the rising cost of postal services, a modest increase in postal rates is being proposed. Sir, I had announced setting up of an expert committee headed by Deputy Governor to suggest rationalization of administered interest increase. The committee has given its report, which has been examined by the government. Accordingly, I propose to take the following measures. Interest rates will now be administered interest rates will now be benchmarked to the average actual yields of government securities of equivalent maturities in the secondary market. Accordingly, most administered interest rates are being reduced by 50 basis points from March 1, 2002. Such adjustment will henceforth be made annually on a non-discretionary automatic basis. The benefit of reduction in interest rates on small saving deposits will be fully passed on to the states. A corresponding reduction of 50 basis points will be made in the interest rate applicable to Government of India relief bonds. Further, a ceiling of rupees 2 lakh per year is being put on investment in these bonds. The entire net proceeds of a small savings will be transferred to state governments beginning April 1, 2002 from the current transfer of 80%. Consequently, additional loan assistance of about rupees 10,000 crore will be available to the states along with the benefits of a lower interest rate. The state governments will be enabled to prepay their high cost of past debts from these additional resources, which would be at a lower interest rate. Modalities for this prepayment of small savings debt of the state governments will be worked out in consultation with them and the Reserve Bank of India. The interest rate on plan loans, a portion of central assistance to state plans, is being reduced by 50 basis points. Shame, shame. Alignment of interest rate on GPF by the state governments will be reduced. GPF interest rates at the center will reduce the burden of interest of the state governments. Revisions are being made in the tax treatment of small savings, which will be outlined in Part B of my speech. The implementation of this long-sought reform in the treatment of small saving and administered interest rates is another step forward in the deregulation of interest rates in the economy that has been carried out in phases over the last 10 years. They should help in reducing the interest burden on the government and private sector alike in future. So the present pension scheme of government employees casts an open-ended financial burden on the government. I had announced the appointment of a high-level expert group to develop a new pension scheme based on defined contributions for new recruits entering government service. The expert group has now submitted its report to the government. It has proposed a hybrid scheme that combines contributions from employees and the union government on a matching basis. on the one hand, while committing the employees a defined benefit as pension. The report is being considered by the government, and new pension scheme for the new recruits will be announced and implemented by June 1, 2002. With a streamlined procedure for disinvestment and privatization, I am happy to report that the government has now completed strategic sales in 7 public sector companies and some hotel properties of the Hotel Corporation of India and ITDC. The change in approach from the disinvestment of a small lots of shares to a strategic sales of blocks of shares to a strategic investors has improved the price-earning ratios obtained. We expect to complete the disinvestment in other 6 companies and the remaining hotels of HCI and ITDC this year. Disinvestment receipts for the present year are estimated at Rs 5,000 crore, excluding the special dividend from BSNL of Rs 1887 crore. Encouraged by these results, I am once again taking credit for a receipt of Rs 12,000 crore from the disinvestment next year. Sir, modernization and upgradation of our defense preparedness is an area of highest national priority. I have made a provision of Rs 65,000 crore for defense expenditure for next year. In case of need, I shall not hesitate to provide more funds for this purpose. I shall not hesitate as a measure of welfare for the defense forces and their families. As announced by the Prime Minister in his Independence Day speech, a major program of housing construction for defense personnel is also being taken up. Sir, the challenge of fiscal management is equally acute in case of states. We have been working jointly with the states through the Fiscal Reform Incentive Fund set up on the recommendations of the 11th Finance Commission. Some state governments have taken bold measures to bring down non-productive expenditure to improve their fiscal situation. 12 states have so far drawn up medium-term fiscal reform programs in consultation with the Government of India in the current year and have been provided assistance from the incentive fund. The reform of small savings schemes, together with interest reduction and debt swap facility that I have already mentioned, will also help the states. It will be our joint endeavor to bring down the consolidated debt to GDP ratios to a sustainable levels by 2005. Sir, as I have mentioned earlier, we are now providing reform-linked assistance to the states for a number of sectors like the APDRP, the AIBP, the URIF, the RIDF, for which total amount of Rs 12,300 crore has been provided. In addition, a lump sum provision of 2,500 crore has been provided for policy reform in sectors which are constraining growth and development. I am confident that with the joint efforts of Centre and the states, we will be able to put in place programs and policies which will remove the barriers to growth, accelerate the development process, and improve the quality of life of our people. Sir, the revised estimate for the current fiscal year show a decrease in expenditure of Rs 10,787 crore as compared to the budget estimates. Net tax revenue for the centre are estimated to be Rs 1,42,348 crore compared to the budget estimate of Rs 1,63,031 crore, thereby reflecting a shortfall of Rs 20,683 crore. The major shortfall is due to lower collection of customs and union excise duties, mainly due to industrial slowdown. Non-tax revenue is expected to be Rs 70,224 crore, Rs 1,510 crore more than the estimated level of 68,714 crore. However, disinvestment receipts at Rs 5,000 crore are much lower than the budget estimate of 12,000 crore. In the budget estimate for 2000-2003, the total expenditure is estimated at 4,10,309 crore, of which 1,13,500 crore is for plan and Rs 2,96,809 crore for non-plan. So the budget support for central and state and UT plans has been placed at Rs 1,13,500 crore, an increase of 18,400 crore over budget estimates of 2000-2001. This amounts to an increase of 19.35% over last year, which is the highest increase in a decade. Gross budgetary support for the central plan is being enhanced from rupees 60,276 crore to the revised estimate 66,871 crore in 2000-2003. Central plan assistance to states and union territories in 2002-2003 is also proposed to be increased to rupees 46,629 crore from rupees 38,878 crore in the revised estimate in 2001-2002. While the increase in the central plan outlay is about 11%, the increase in central state plan is nearly 20%. Non-plan expenditure is estimated to be this that.
Raghavan ji, Mr. Raghavan Singh, Mr. Raghavan. Mr. Raghavan Prasar Singh, आप बैठ जाए ना, क्या कर रहे हैं आप? ये ठीक नहीं है, आप बैठ जाए प्लीज। क्या कर रहे हैं? No, please change your attitude. No, otherwise I have to take action against you. क्या कर रहे हैं रोज आप? सारा हाउस को आप डिस्टर्ब कर रहे हैं। ये क्या समझते हैं ना आपका हाउस का बारे में? आपका हाउस का बारे में क्या समझते हैं आप? आप बैठ जाए ना, क्या कर रहे हैं रोज?
Sir, I now present my
हंगामा हो
tax
गया आपको,
proposals.
तमाशा कर रहे हैं आप।
I have formulated my tax proposals.
The order, please, Mr. Panj.
Proposals against the backdrop of the current
Honorable
economic
member,
slowdown.
please.
My tax proposals
Mr.
are intended to revive demand.
Mr. Panjbhai, please take your
promote
seat.
investment, accelerate economic growth, and enhance productivity.
Mr. Panj.
They are also aimed at widening the tax base, rationalization and simplification of tax structures, encouraging voluntary compliance.
Mr. Panjbhai, please. क्या कर रहे हैं? Mr. Panjbhai, please. क्या कर रहे हैं आप? No, you are also disturbing the house. आप क्या कर रहे हैं? आप कंट्रोल कर रहे हैं हाउस को?
Sir, I present my indirect tax proposals first.
The entire nation is watching how we are behaving in the house. Please take your seat.
Sir, I present my indirect tax
You
proposals
don't know how
first.
to behave in the house.
Sir, in my earlier budgets, I have made strenuous efforts to address the issues of cascading, distortions, anomalies, and
सारे
inequities
ट्रेडिशंस को
in
सिस्टम्स को आप डिस्ट्रॉय कर रहे हैं हाउस में।
the commodity tax structure. I have achieved significant rationalization of tax structures relating to both excise and customs duties. The number of rates are few and procedures more transparent than ever before. The service tax, though confined to a limited number of services, has gained ground. In 2000-2001, I had introduced the rate of 16% as the rate of the central value-added tax in the excise duty structure. Last year, I had reduced the three rates of a special excise duty to a single rate of 16%. This rationalization in the duty structure has considerably reduced disputes and litigation and the cost of compliance to the assessees. Above all, it has put in place a system which is stable, just, and rational. We only need to refine it further. I propose to abolish the 16% special excise duty on a number of items. Henceforth, the special excise duty shall be confined to the following 8 items only: polyester filament yarn, motor cars, multi-utility vehicles, tires for replacement, aerated soft drinks and soft drink concentrates, air conditioners, pan masala, chewing tobacco, and miscellaneous tobacco preparations. I propose to do away with the consensual rate of 8% excise duty applicable to LPG, kerosene, auto CNG, and diesel engines up to 10 horsepower, which will now attract CENVAT rate of 16%. Mr. Speaker, sir, the rates of excise duty have now been considerably moderated. However, several exemptions still continue. In my last budget, I had imposed excise duty at a moderate rate of 4% on a few items. I propose to increase this rate to 4% to the next slab of 8% this year. Simultaneously, I propose to impose excise duty at 4% on a few more items which have remained exempt so far. Cigars, cheroots, and cigarillos of tobacco and tobacco substitute, which have been exempt so far, shall attract 16% CENVAT. In view of the abolition of administered price mechanism on petroleum products and in order to provide for the subsidy on LPG and kerosene oil, I propose to make some changes in the duty structure of petroleum products. The rate of cess applicable to indigenous crude oil under the Oil Industry Act will be increased from rupees 900 per metric tons to rupees 1800 per metric ton with effect from 1st March 2002. I propose to reduce the ad valorem rate of excise duty applicable to motor spirit from 90% to 32%. However, I propose to impose on it a surcharge of 6 rupees per litre. But the surcharge on ethanol doped motor spirit will be 5 rupees and 25 paise per litre. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Indian textile industry occupies an important place in our economy. It is the second largest provider of employment after agriculture. The multi-fiber agreement will be phased out by 2004. Domestic market has also been opened up. Now, our textile industry has to prepare itself for the challenges ahead. I have carved out a special package of incentives for the textile industry. I propose to maintain the excise duty rates on yarns at present. Cotton hank yarn is exempt from excise duty but is being widely misused. In order to ensure that the benefit accrues only to the handloom weavers, I propose to bring hank yarn within the net excise duty at 8%, but the same time provide for appropriate subsidy on the price of hank yarn purchased by them. This will put an end to misuse and target the subsidy better. The Ministry of Textiles would announce the details of this subsidy scheme. In order to enable the weavers to avail of SENVAT credit scheme, I propose to allow the weavers of grey fabrics to pay their excise duty on an optional basis. I propose to extend a similar option to the knitting sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, in all humility, I can claim credit for introducing the SENVAT rate of 16% in the excise duty structure. However, in the case of textiles, I am making an exception and granting a remission of 4%. The rate of excise duty on fabrics, made-ups and garments would be 12%. The special dispensation shall continue up to 28 to 2005. Industrial fabrics would, however, continue at 16%. At present, hand processing of textile fabrics by independent processors is exempt from excise duty even if power is used in 12 specified processes in the case of cotton fabrics and 7 specified processes in the case of man-made fabrics. I propose to confine this exemption to only 3 processes, namely scarring, hydro-extraction, and calendering. I propose to abolish the compounded levy scheme for independent power processors as it is incongruous with the reduced rate of duty that I have proposed. Handloom sector is not affected by my budget proposals. Excise duty exemption on handloom fabrics will continue. I now propose to grant exemption to handloom garments also from excise duty, subject to certification from the Handloom Export Promotion Council. In order to enable the textile industry to modernize itself and acquire new technology, I propose to exempt excise duty on automatic shuttless looms. I also propose to exempt excise duty on a specified processing machinery and a specified silk reeling, weaving, and twisting machinery. The custom duty on such machinery is also being proposed to be reduced from 25% to 10%. I also propose to exempt a specified jute machinery from excise duty. I hope this package will enable the textile industry to face global competition. My proposals include a special dispensation of excise duty structure for the petroleum refineries located in the Northeast region. With effect from 1st March 2002, the petroleum products produced by all these refineries shall be charged excise duty at half the normal rates of excise duty otherwise applicable to petroleum products. Inland air travel tax is exempt for air travel within the northeastern states. I propose to extend this exemption to air travel to and from northeast states also. Tea industry is currently facing a number of problems in the domestic as well as the international market for a variety of reasons. In order to promote the interests of tea growers, I propose to reduce the excise duty on tea from rupees 2 per kg to rupees 1 per kg. We have to face the menace of HIV/AIDS with determination. I propose to exempt a specified anti-AIDS drugs from excise duty from effect from 1st March 2002. A specified cold chain equipment are exempt from excise duty. I propose to add 3 more equipment to this list to promote the preservation of fruits and vegetables. The excise duty exemption scheme for a smallest sector is applicable to granite. In view of the fact that it is not available to marble, I propose to withdraw this exemption from granite also. The scheme of excise duty exemption based on maximum retail price of goods has resolved valuation disputes in a dramatic way. I propose to extend this scheme to 9 more categories of items this year, thus raising the number to 92 categories of items. Mr. Speaker, sir, justification of taxing more services does not require any elaboration. This year, I propose to extend the service tax to the following services: life insurance, including insurance, auxiliary services relating to life insurance, inland cargo handling, storage and warehousing services, except for agricultural produce and cold storages, event management, rail travel agents, health clubs and fitness centers, beauty parlors, fashion designers, cable operators, dry cleaning services. Service tax is applicable to specified services provided by banks and non-banking financial companies. I propose to extend the service tax to corporate bodies that provide similar services. The tax on these services shall come into force from a notified date. Sir, our tourism industry has been adversely affected by recent events. In December 2001, I had announced exemption from service tax on the services provided by hotels. The exemption expires on 31st March 2002. I propose to extend this exemption for 1 more year up to 31st March 2003. Sir, I now present my proposals relating to customs duties. The House may recall that in my last budget, I had announced that I would move progressively to reduce the peak rate of customs duty to 20% within 3 years. I had also said that modalities for this will be worked out in time for the next budget. I had accordingly set up an interministerial working group to recommend the modalities. The group has suggested a roadmap for this starting with this year's budget. After careful consideration of the group's report, I have decided that by the year 2004 and 5, there would be only 2 basic rates of customs duty, namely 10% covering generally raw materials, intermediates and components, and 20% covering generally final products. The existing rates would be adjusted and subsumed in these 2 basic rates, with some exceptions on account of WTO bindings or higher tariffs for agricultural products. In accordance with the roadmap, I propose to reduce the peak rate from 35% to 30% this year. I also propose to make some changes to take care of some current problems. Our steel industry has been affected by slowdown in demand and has suffered large losses. In order to reduce its cost of production, I propose to lower customs duty on a number of refractory raw materials by 10%. These include natural graphite powder, silicon metal, sintered alumina, fused zirconia, and boron carbide. I also propose to reduce the duty on graphite electrodes of above 24-inch diameter from 25% to 15%. Ships imported for braking are charged to custom duty at 5% along with CVD and a special additional duty. I propose to revise this by increasing the basic duty on ships for braking from 5% to 15% and exempting them from CVD and a special additional duty. This to reduce the disparity between rolled products produced by the steel plants and cheaper products produced by ship braking. The steel industry is troubled by imports of seconds and defectives at cheaper rates. In order to address their concern, I propose to increase the basic custom duty on seconds and defectives of steel to the bound rate of 40%. Non-ferrous metals are used for a large number of applications by different segments of industry. I propose to reduce the custom duty on copper, zinc, and lead from 35% to 25%, and on aluminium and tin from 25% to 15%. The EXIM policy for the year 2000-2001, my colleague, the Minister for Commerce and Industry, announced the scheme for setting up of special economic zones that are intended to provide comprehensive facilities at one place for export production. Special economic zones would be entitled to procure duty-free equipment, raw materials, components, etc., whether imported or purchased locally. The benefit of such exemption shall be applicable to both the developers of special economic zones as well as the units located therein. In order to encourage development of world-class infrastructure facilities, I propose to reduce the custom duty on specified equipment for ports and airports to 10%. In view of the difficulties being faced by the civil aviation sector, I propose to exempt duty on aeroplanes, helicopters, gliders, simulators of aeroplanes, and their parts and raw materials. Mr. Speaker, sir, India is a signatory to the Information Technology Agreement. The House may recall that in 1998, I had announced that zero duty regime on IT products would be preponed and implemented by 2003. However, the local manufacturers have urged me strongly that it may be made effective only from 2005. This would give them an opportunity to gear up to meet the challenges of international competition. I have decided to accept their demand. As a further measure of assistance to indigenous industry, I propose to reduce the custom duty on a number of hardware inputs to 5% and certain capital goods to 15%. The duty on certain items would be reduced to 10% or 5% as per WTO binding. The use of cellular phones is increasing by leaps and bounds, but import through unauthorized channels is a matter of concern. I therefore propose to exempt cellular phones and pagers from CVD. The basic custom duty is, however, being raised from 5% to 10%. Sir, I have repeatedly assured the House that our customs tariff would be pegged at appropriate levels to protect the interests of the farmers. In my last budget, I had increased the custom duty on tea, coffee, copra, coconut, and desiccated coconut to 70%. This year, I propose to increase the custom duty on tea and coffee to 100% and on natural rubber, poppy seeds, pepper, cloves, and cardamom to 70%. I also propose to increase the duty on pulses from 5% to 10%. I propose to reduce the duty I propose to reduce custom duty on agricultural machinery and implements from 25% to 15% to encourage our farmers to acquire new and efficient technology. A number of drugs are exempt from customs duty. I propose to include more drugs used for treatment of cancer and other critical diseases in the list of fully exempted drugs. Vaccine for immunization against Japanese encephalitis shall also be exempt from customs duty. It has been reported that certain drugs are presently exempt from customs duty but are now being made indigenously. In order to provide reasonable incentive to domestic manufacturers of these drugs, I propose to impose a basic customs duty of 5% on these drugs. Sir, India has a large number of diabetic patients. They have to undergo frequent blood sugar tests. In order to provide some relief to them, I propose to reduce the custom duty on glucometers and test strips from 25% to 10%. As a measure of rationalization and removal of anomaly, sir, incidentally, I am not a diabetic patient. As a measure of rationalization and removal of anomaly, I propose to reduce the custom duty on non-PDS kerosene from 35% to 20% and increase the custom duty on kerosene sold under PDS scheme from 5% to 10%. In order to promote the interest in science, I propose to reduce the custom duty on planetarium equipment, parts and accessories to 15% and also exempt them from CVD and special additional customs duty. India has technical capability, sir, of becoming an uplinking hub for television channels for the SAARC countries. In order to promote state-of-the-art uplinking facilities at competitive costs, I propose to reduce custom duty on certain earth station equipment and studio equipment from 35% to 25%. I propose to reduce the custom duty on cement and clinkers from 25% to 20%. This should help in keeping the domestic prices under check. The customs duty on imported liquors is bound at 182% for the current year under the WTO. Accordingly, I propose to reduce the custom duty on these items from 210 to 182%. I also propose to rationalize the rates of CVD applicable to liquors and wines to 75% value up from 50%. Passengers, sir, passengers returning from abroad on transfer of residence are allowed certain items of personal use on payment of customs duty at a flat rate of 35%. I propose to reduce this rate to 30% and also add a few more items like laptop computers, portable photocopy machines, digital video disc players, video cassette disc players in the eligible list of items. The overall limit of transfer of residence is also being raised from 1.5 lakh to 5 lakh. I propose to impose nominal customs duty of 5% on some of the items that are exempt at present. I also propose to impose a special additional duty on certain other items that are currently subject to 5% customs duty. I have proposed a few other changes that are of a minor nature. I have also proposed some legislative changes with regard to customs, excise, and service tax laws that are contained in the finance bill. I do not wish to take the time of the House in elaborating upon them in detail. Mr. Speaker, sir, the customs and excise duty structures have been greatly simplified in the past years. With the changes that I have proposed, the revenue from 16% SENVAT will be more than 85% of the total ad valorem duties. In the next 2 years, it can be reduced to only one, namely 16%. The customs tariff will also comprise of only 2 basic rates in 3 years' time. In my previous budgets, I have also made considerable efforts to simplify procedures. However, the task is not yet complete. Our tax administration needs to take full advantage of information technology. Our tax system needs to encourage voluntary compliance, provide efficient service to the taxpayers, eliminate unproductive work, and enhance efficiency. The discretionary powers needed to be replaced by rule-based mechanism. All these aspects of tax administration deserve to be examined in their entirety. I propose to set up an expert committee to make a comprehensive study of these aspects. My proposals on the excise side are estimated to result in a revenue gain of rupees 6,700 crore in a year. On the customs side, my proposals are estimated to result in a revenue loss of 2,200 crore. However, I anticipate buoyancy in the indirect tax revenue and estimate that the total tax collection next year would be rupees 1,43,702 crore. Copies of the notifications issued to give effect to the changes in excise and customs duty shall be laid on the table of the House in due course. I now turn to direct taxes. Personal income tax rates have been at 10%, 20%, and 30%, and corporation tax at 35% for several years. They are reasonable, and therefore I have left them unchanged in my last 4 budgets. I do not propose to change them this year also. At the same time, it is important to recognize the need for specific interventions to provide a stimulus for industrial growth. I outline these now. I have already mentioned the need to provide incentives for fresh investment in the industrial sector. To give impetus to such investment, I propose to allow additional depreciation at the rate of 15% on new plant and machinery acquired on or after 1st April 2002 for setting up new industrial units or for expanding the installed capacity of existing units by at least 25%. There is a disparity between the rates of corporation tax applicable to foreign companies and domestic companies. This disparity arose in the past partly due to certain levies like surcharge being applicable to domestic companies but not to foreign companies. To correct this, I propose to reduce the rate applicable to foreign companies from 48% to 40%. The small-scale industry has been making an important contribution to economic growth and deserves continued support. In order to enable the Small Industries Development Bank of India to augment its resources and provide cheaper credit to the small-scale sector, I propose to allow capital gains exemption under Section 54 EC to the Income Tax Act to amounts invested in bonds issued by SIDBI. In my budget for 2000-2001, I had announced the setting up of a credit guarantee scheme for small-scale industries. Accordingly, the credit guarantee scheme trust has been set up. I propose to grant full exemption from tax to the income of this trust. Continuing the thrust given to the housing sector over the last 4 years, I propose to allow the deduction of interest payable on housing loans for self-occupied houses, even where such houses are acquired or constructed after 31st March 2003, as long as the acquisition or construction is completed within 3 years from the end of the financial year in which the loan was taken. For giving further impetus to investment in the housing sector, I propose to extend the capital gains exemption provided in Section 54 EC of the Income Tax Act to bonds issued by the National Housing Bank. So the shipping industry in India is internationally competitive and is capable of further growth. In my budget for 2000-2001, I had provided for a deduction of the entire profits of a shipping company if the amount deducted was kept in reserve for purchase of new ships. However, the aggregate of the amounts that can be transferred to such reserves is limited to twice the amount of the paid-up share capital of the company. I propose to extend it to cover share premium reserve and general reserve also. This reserve will not be considered while computing the book profits, and shipping companies would thus be out of the purview of the minimum alternate tax. Presently, banks are allowed to deduct up to 5% of their total income against provisions made by them for bad and doubtful debts. In order to strengthen the financial position of the banks, I propose to increase this allowance to 7.5% of the total income. Further, in my budget for year 99-2000, I had granted an option to banks to deduct up to 5% of their NPAs falling in the category of loss or doubtful assets as on the last day of the accounting year. I propose to enhance this option to 10%, and also allow a similar option of deduction up to 10% of loss or doubtful assets of public financial institutions. There has been a persistent demand that the benefit of carry forward and set off of past losses in cases of mergers and of companies owning industrial undertakings should be extended to more sectors. The telecommunications sector in particular is undergoing a phase of rapid consolidation and expansion. With a view to encourage its growth, I propose to extend this benefit to companies providing telecom services and eligible for deduction under Section 80 IA. I also propose to constitute an expert group to examine the extension of this benefit to other companies in the services sector, including the financial service sector. In order to provide further fiscal relief to the tourism sector, I propose to take the following measures. Expenditure tax on hotels will henceforth apply only to room charges and will be payable only where such charges are rupees 3,000 or more per day, as against the existing threshold of rupees 2,000 per day. The deduction available under Section 80 HHD of the Income Tax Act in respect of foreign exchange earnings of hotels or tour operators will be enhanced to bring it in line with the deduction available to exporters under Section 80 HHC. A deduction of 50% of the profits earned by units setting up and operating large convention centers will be allowed for 5 years under Section 80IB. I have emphasized the importance of the entertainment industry in Part A of my speech. To give a further boost to this fast-growing sector, I propose to allow for the next 5 years a deduction of 50% of the profits earned by the units constructing and operating multiplex theatres in non-metropolitan towns. As a measure for protection and regeneration of our environment, I propose to provide for an incentive by way of tax deduction under Section 35 AC of the Income Tax Act in respect of amounts paid to the company or institution approved by the National Committee for Social and Economic Welfare for carrying out projects of softwood plantation on degraded non-forest land. A deduction under this section will be available in respect of payment towards conservation of natural resources and afforestation. Last year, for ensuring a degree of transparency in the affairs of charitable and religious trusts, as well as certain other institutions claiming exemption under Section 1023C, I had introduced a provision requiring them to publish their accounts in a local newspapers if the total receipts during a year exceeded rupees 1 crore. I have received a large number of representations pointing out to the possibility of misuse of such information by antisocial elements. In view of these representations, I propose to delete this requirement. I further propose to rationalize certain provisions relating to these trusts and institutions so as to allow the accumulation of any part of their income only up to a maximum period of 5 years, and to clarify that inter-trust donations may only be made either from the corpus or from the current year's income. Following the Gujarat earthquake last year, I had granted a 100% tax deduction to donations made to certain approved charitable trusts and institutions that were to be applied before 31st March 2002 in relief work. As such relief work is still going on in many areas, I propose to extend the terminal date for utilization of such donations from 31st March 2002 to 31st March 2003. Last year, I had rationalized the rules of valuation of purgates on the basis of their cost to the employer, except in respect of houses and cars, where different criteria are adopted for simplicity. To relieve the burden on lower salaried employees, I propose to provide that no perquisites will be assessed for the assessment year 2002-2003 in case of employees whose taxable salary, excluding perquisites, is up to rupees 1 lakh. For subsequent years, I propose to give an option to the employer to pay the tax on perquisites on behalf of the employees. Under Section 89 of the Income Tax Act, a tax relief is provided in case of additional tax burden imposed in 1 year due to receipt of arrears of salary. As a welfare measure, I propose to allow this relief also in cases where family pension is received in arrears. In continuation with the taxpayer-friendly measures brought about by me in my earlier budgets, I propose to abolish the provisions of Chapter 20C of the Income Tax Act, which require a clearance to be obtained from the appropriate authority before registering a transfer of an immovable property. Sir, some of the exemptions and deductions currently provided in the Income Tax Act have become redundant and are not in harmony with the moderate tax regime that we have in India. The Advisory Group on Tax Policy and Tax Administration for the 10th Plan has recommended deletion of a number of such exemptions. I have carefully examined each recommendation of the group and have come to the conclusion that some of these exemptions are indeed unnecessary. I therefore propose to withdraw or discontinue the exemptions which are not required any longer. The Advisory Group has also recommended deletion of various exemptions granted to incomes of approved or notified bodies or institutions, including educational and medical institutions. I do not think that the exemptions allowed to these institutions and bodies which are fulfilling a social objective should be withdrawn. However, I propose to require all such bodies and institutions to file returns of income every year so as to enable a periodical verification of whether the prescribed conditions which primarily relate to application of the income are being fulfilled, and also to enable the prescribed authority to withdraw the approval or notification of such entities if they are found to have violated such conditions. Last year, I had withdrawn the tax exemption allowed to income earned by NABARD, National Housing Bank, and SIDBI, since these institutions have come of age and are working on commercial lines. For the same reasons, I propose to withdraw this year the exemption to income of the National Dairy Development Board, Prasar Bharati, and the Oil Industry Development Board. Various amendments made over the years in the rules relating to depreciation have given rise to a plethora of such rates of different types of assets. The relevance of the need to continue with these rates and whether they should be scaled down to a maximum rate of 60% should be a matter for open discussion. The relevant details will be put up on the website of the Finance Ministry. After taking into account the views expressed, a revised schedule of depreciation rates will be notified. Under the present system of taxation, dividends and income from units, the company or the mutual funds pay a 10% tax, and the income is exempt in the hands of the recipient. Such a system not only taxes income in the hands of a person to whom it does not belong, it also militates against the pass-through status, which is the very essence of a mutual fund. There is also an inherent equity in the present system, which allows persons in the high-income groups to be taxed at a much lower rate than the rates applicable to them. These issues have been troubling me over the last 4 years, and I am now convinced that the existing system must go. I therefore propose to abolish the distribution tax of 10% on companies and mutual funds on the dividends or income distributed by them. Such income will henceforth be taxed in the hands of the recipients at the rates applicable to them and will be subject to tax deduction at source at the rate of 10%. In order to avoid a cascading effect, companies receiving such income will be entitled to claim a deduction for the amount in turn distributed by them as dividend. To continue the support given by me to equity-oriented funds of the UTI and other mutual funds, the income received during the financial year 2002-2003 by unit holders of such funds will be taxed only at 10%, as at present. A tax rebate of 20% of the amount invested in certain instruments is specified in Section 88 of the Income Tax Act is presently allowable to all individuals and Hindu undivided families as an investment for retaining a part of their earnings in the form of savings. Taxpayers in the higher income brackets, however, do not require fiscal incentives to save through various designated instruments. I therefore propose to allow the rebate at the existing rate of 20% only to persons having taxable income of up to rupees 1,50,000. Persons having taxable income between rupees 1,50,000 and rupees 5 lakhs will henceforth get a rebate of only 10% of the amount invested, and no rebate will be allowed where taxable income exceeds rupees 5 lakhs. The special rebate of 30% for persons having taxable salary up to rupees 1 lakh will, however, continue. Further, while the tax existing limits on the qualifying amounts of investment will remain, I propose to provide a clarification in law that the rebate will be allowed on investments made at any time during the year as long as the amount invested is less than the taxable income of the year. Presently, tax exemption is available to certain categories of employees receiving amounts up to rupees 5 lakhs as VRS compensation. I propose to extend this exemption to employees of certain institutions of national or state level importance to be notified in this behalf. I am also making certain procedural changes which are included in the Finance Bill. A scheme called Sampark is being launched by the Income Tax Department, which will enable taxpayers to obtain information and forms through the Internet. User-friendly software will be made available by the department to enable taxpayers to prepare their returns of income.